Let's move on to last drinks. You both, you, Mr. Gallacher, have said that street crime, drunken, antisocial behaviour is right up at your top of your list in the policing of New South Wales. Now, the Police Association has run a last drinks campaign. The hard question to you both is, why haven't you, you both say you're evidence-based, or you look at evidence in the formulation of policy, why haven't you moved to the logical conclusion of that, and that is extend the Newcastle constraints to the rest of the state, even on a trial basis? You say, we're going to trial this across the state and see what happens to the assault rate. Yes, you.
Look, people always talk about the Newcastle experience, but you've got to give credit to what's happening in Manly as well. What the local command did there, not Communities New South Wales, the local command in Manly sat down with the local licensed premises and actually put forward a proposal. The licensed premises in that area have embraced. They close at 3 o'clock. And when you talk to people in that area, they'll tell you that they're making more money now than they've done in the past. What Barry O'Farrell and I have continued to say, if local communities, through the cops, through the accords, through the councils, are putting forward local propositions to address their local issues, then we will sit down with them and work. But on a blanket rule saying let's shut it all at 3 o'clock in New South Wales, changing hours, I don't think it's going to change people's behaviour towards alcohol.
But if it's a potential systemic answer to a problem, I mean, why wouldn't you look at it as a template for the rest of the state?
Because what we've continued to say, if local communities want to put a local solution forward, as they've done in Manly, as they're proposing to do.
Where's your leadership? Where's your leadership, Mr. Gallacher? I know I'm directing this all to you, but
we're not coming in and dictating to every community, because it doesn't apply to every community in New South Wales as well. Not everyone has 24-hour licensing in every suburb and every town. But changing hours on its own is not going to change people's behaviour to go and write themselves off and go and belt somebody or abuse somebody out in the street. We need to start talking about responsible consumption of alcohol, not just responsible service of alcohol.
Bipartisan support of response from you, I say.
Probably, yes, I'd say so. Look, the
this
last
is too cosy.
The last feather bedding. With respect to the association, I know they're trying to look after their members as well as they can.
Well, from being assaulted, yes.
Well, the Last Drinks campaign has as its central logical proposition that a one-size-fits-all approach is the right way to go, and I reject that. What we continue to do is to look at specific localities and, as Mike said, to apply local solutions to local problems. Now, let me give you an example of why I think the Last Drinks campaign would potentially shift the problem. When I go out to the Shire and I talk to the local area commander of Miranda, I say, what's your biggest headache down here? He says, street parties. It's not the entertainment precinct, it's the parties and streets that lit up Miranda like a bushfire and stretch the police to have to go party after party after party. Sometimes it is preferable to have them in an area like at the north of my electorate, Coogee, where you've got them contained, where the police can watch them, where they can talk to the publicans, disperse them, have a presence on the ground, and send them home after a night, and just get them out of that precinct. You might very well shift the problem back into streets and homes, and at the core of all this, though, is the fact that we do have a binge drinking culture in New South Wales, but more so in some particular areas than others. If you were to be successful in breaching personal responsibility and changing that binge drinking culture, which is a very, very tough nut to crack, I can see, that would go a long way towards fixing the problem.
Look, forget about the Police Association's campaign and the Emergency Service Workers campaign on last drinks. You guys are rejecting the consistent advice of the Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research, are you not?
Well, no, we're not. Let me have a look. Let me answer that question.
You've got that.
Don Weatherburn says, my feeling that if managers of licensed premises can run their premises without violence or incident, then there should not be restrictions placed upon them. I wouldn't want to see draconian measures placed on people who run their businesses well and who manage to avoid serving alcohol to intoxicated persons. He also said, 16th of September 2010, it's encouraging to see after a long time of trying to manage the problem of assaults to actually see some headway being made. He said that on 7:02 in September last year. Now let me give you an example of one particular establishment, South Juniors in my electorate. One of the biggest clubs in New South Wales, About 25,000 people come in a week. If you ask the licensing sergeant at Eastern Beaches, Brad Gray, are they a problem? He says they're not on the radar. Now, they employ hundreds and hundreds of people. Families in my electorate, Department of Housing people rely on the juniors to employ them. Why go and tell them they need to shut down at 1 o'clock when they are not on the police radar?
Okay, that's your position.
Well,
Boxer.
you look at Manly, look what's happened with Manly. They took a different policing strategy in Manly. When was the last time we had a glassing in Manly? We always talk of Newcastle because Newcastle was where it was forced and foisted upon the liquor industry in that area.
And there's no other hotspot in New South Wales. Manly, go on.
No, you look what happened in Manly, where the police took a different approach in Manly, and it wasn't through the intervention of some other agency. They led the initiative, sat down with the publicans and said, we will supply a policing strategy. We need you guys to tighten up on the responsible service of alcohol, and this is what we're going to do. Guess what? We end up getting a result that you don't hear anyone talk about Manly, a great result, where a local community has actually found its own solution.
Same things happen at Coogee.
And you reject outright, I take it, that you've been captured by the sexual interest, the vested interest in the liquor and hotel industry.
Well, they stopped donating to us completely, so yes, I reject that entirely.
No evidence of any probative value.
They're doing better than we are, so yes, I can reject it.
Well, how much money have you taken?
Yeah,
Not you personally.
Look, I've not taken any money from anybody. The fact is...
Your great party, though.
Well, you can ask that question to our state director, because I don't know what money the state director gets, but it's all declared.
Published in the Sunday papers 2 weeks ago, it's substantial.
Well, what was the quantum?
I can't remember. I think the Labor Party got $5,000 from the AHA in the last year, and I think the Libs got 800,000.
It's funny how the quantum changes, isn't it? Let's move on to police strength, because it goes to question to our capacity in policing in New South Wales. Now, Mr. Gallacher, the association wants the government to honour its commitment to an effective strength requiring an immediate increase of 400 officers. Can you reiterate exactly what your policy is on this?
That is a matter that rests with Barry O'Farrell. I have made a submission to Barry O'Farrell, and over the remaining time during this election campaign, Barry will be making the announcement in terms of the commitment we will make in regards to police numbers.
And will the association be happy or unhappy?
We'll find out after we make the announcement.
As to the strength of do you think it's adequate at the moment with what's been...
I'm just flabbergasted that Mr. Gallagher's announced that Barry O'Farrell's actually going to formulate and announce a policy at some stage during the election campaign. Rolled himself up like a porcupine and saying nothing, which is a great insult to the people of New South Wales, and we'll wait on bated breath for this amazing event to happen, but I won't hold my breath. Look, you look at our record. In this term of government, to December 11, we've delivered 1,500 new positions, fully funded. In the 2007 term, another 1,500. 1,500 then. So, almost 16,000 officers by December 2011, and that's a terrific record. We'll be making an announcement soon as well about some police strength. We've already made over the last 8 or 9 days a constant string of announcements about law and order policies, but our run's not important.
You don't seem to accept that you know where all these allegedly greater strength are, where they're deployed. You just indicated in your opening address that...
I'm not the only one. You talk to senior officers within the hierarchy and they will say to you exactly the same thing. Why is it we're closing down stations and what's eating them? We've had 2,700 police leave since 2007. 2,700 police have left and no one has bothered to ask them why.
Is that Auditor General... Is that your own audit of it, or Auditor General? Who did that work?
These are police department figures on their own website.
Right, in response to questions you put?
No, you actually monitor the website and it shows you the ones walking out the door in terms of the changes in numbers in the New South Wales Police. But the fact is, no one bothers to ask them why they're going. And we've continued to say for more years than I care to remember, why not reinstate compulsory exit interview? Because if you've got a problem in the New South Wales Police Force, there are those who want to leave because it's simply their time to go. I was one. There are those that want to pursue other career opportunities. But when you talk to frontline cops, you'll hear from them. They've had enough. And no one bothers to ask them why.
if we're a sharp police force, we should have an exit
That's,
shouldn't we?
look, let me just say that's one of the great scare campaigns of the Liberal Party. The attrition rate in the public service in New South Wales, Queensland, runs at somewhere between 9.5% and 10% per year. So 9% of the RTA will leave the Attorney General's Department.
Normal retirement.
Yes.
Or moving on.
For all sorts of reasons.
We spent $100,000 training each one of those other
And
public
so,
servants.
but the attrition rate in the police force at the moment, and over the last decade, 4.5%. So it's half the rate of the public service. There's a waiting list a mile long for people to get into the police force.
People want to
They're
stay with the
joining-
people want to stay with the coppers now, do they?
joining in record numbers, and they're staying in record numbers. This is a furphy, and exit interviews are not compulsory, because it would be pretty stupid to do an exit interview with someone who's medically discharged. But they're there for people who want to do them, and the police are not so stupid. I mean, the Liberal Party think they don't know where their officers are, they don't know where the stations are. Mike's going to assist them by doing an order, and they're so dumb they don't even know what people live. It's just ridiculous. It's an insult to the
Could I
police.
just talk about that one comment we made about medical discharge? What about stress? What about the person who develops an injury and then gets ostracised and left at home like a leper and end up developing a mental illness as a result of it? They get depression because no one bothers to come and see them anymore, and they're called a shonk. These guys know what that means. They're called shonks. Now, until you go and speak to each individual officer and you ask them, have you been looked after? What have been the failings in the system? What attempts have been made to get you back to work if that's what you want to do? No, you don't ask the question if you don't want to know the answer.
Well,
Where's the report that substantiates that? What you've
Well,
just
he's got anecdotal evidence by the sound of it, but you've got people complaining to you as the shadow.
Continuously.
Okay, but if well, we presume you're going to be the minister on the after the 26th. What are you going to do about a new occupational health and safety regime, particularly on issues like stress and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is now a recognisable and measurable factor in police work and emergency services?
There needs to be a cultural shift within the organisation. But when our members fall to the wayside through injury, either physical or mental illness or something related to their work, that they cannot perform their fully operational work, that there's an opportunity for the department to step in immediately, to start to put in place a program to get these people back to
But
work.
what about a preventative? Shouldn't we have training, psychological training, to make these people doing this difficult work for us more resilient?
They do that at the academy, but the thing that they don't do in a compulsory way is when they go to a critical incident, there's no counselling that takes place immediately. And I think that's part of the problem, where the old days of saying to somebody, let's go and have a beer and forget about it, they've gone.
Yes.
We actually have to make sure that the counselling is up front, to actually ensure that something that is only a little seed today as a result of going to a fatal or a domestic or whatever it was, doesn't germinate to something more tragic at a later stage.
You've been around for a long time in the portfolio, Minister. You know that post-traumatic stress disorder is a measurable occupational problem for police. Are you satisfied with the regime that you've been administering?
Look, I think you're entering into dangerous territory when politicians who are not experts in policing start telling the police how to do the minutiae of their job. Now, the association have a primary industrial responsibility of caring for their members' welfare. Now, I sat down with Scott and Peter Renfrey and Bob Pritchard while he was still the president. They came to me and they said, in the context of a discussion about death and disability, we're concerned that the police force could do better to manage people in the workplace and could do a better job in achieving all those things that Mike spoke about. So that was one of those occasions where I put the association and the executive together, and I said, let's try and do this better. Across the table, the police executive said, yeah, we will. You tell us what you want, we'll do it. They're doing it. So we're actually doing it now. But as a minister, to walk into a force and say, without invitation, I don't think you're doing this well enough, I'm going to impose a solution upon you, that is not the way to go. The association cares for their members, the executive care for their members as well. They don't want to see people injured or off work. It's not productive, it costs them money. But I'll let them sit down and work out an industrial outcome to that, and I'd assist, as I have done, if there was any pass.
I disagree with you. I think government's role is to drive this. It actually is to set about recognising that there is a problem. We cannot continue
If you've
to
got
walk on
consensus of the association and the management, the executive, So you're going to come in over the top of them, are you?
No, I disagree with the Minister. What he has been
You
told...
see there's a problem. He recognises the problem. He says he's got the regime in place to address it. You say it's not resolved.
It's not resolved. Go and spend time talking to local area commanders who, when they turn up to be quizzed about what's happening in their area, have strips torn off them if they tell bad news. That's a reality.
Heaven forbid. So what would you do exactly?
Not one of them has said that to me, not one. Not one.
Well, what would you do if you were the minister?
You've got to start to look at what plans, what programs are in place right now. I don't think they're good enough. You talk to the association members and they will nod. They will say more needs to be done to make sure that none of our members get left behind, because whatever they're doing now is not good enough.
Listen, Mr. Gallacher, do you have full confidence in the management, the current management of the New South Wales Police Force?
Yes, I've got no reason to doubt them otherwise.
So there'd be no structural change, or you won't have a review of the structures of the police force?
No, what I have said is that I'm not satisfied that the local, and I even indicated in my opening address, I'm not satisfied that the local area command model as we see it now is benefiting all communities in New South Wales. Particularly when you get into the country and regional areas, I think there's scope to examine an alternative local area command model from a local policing model in country New South Wales. As I said to you before, country towns are the victims. When somebody goes off sick at the head station, they end up losing their police and their station is closed down indefinitely until that person comes back on strength. Now, why should country towns that have had stations operating for generations find that the doors are closed? Not only are they not closed, there is an inability in many instances for the police to actually go back to that sector and patrol that sector, even though they're working from the head station. I think structurally we have to look at whether at the end of the day the stakeholders, not the government, not police headquarters, stakeholders, the public of New South Wales are getting a service that they want.
So you're indicating a restructure to a limited extent for regional and rural services. Who would conduct that? Who would conduct that?
Obviously, within the organisation, the Police Association for some time has been looking at alternative resource allocation models. That's one of the things that they've been looking at. But one of the things they also do is to look at police, ex-police that I know have an expertise in this area, who would show some interest to actually come in and have a fresh set of eyes looking over it.
This is called opposition eyes. Barrier Farrell's going to build railways everywhere, roads, there's going to be more doctors, more nurses, there's going to be more schools, and now we're going to have more police. What people have to realise about police officers, Quentin, is that like everything else in New South Wales, they are a finite resource. There's only a number of them. Oppositions love to think that you can just create more officers and send them to Warren, send them down to Murrumbidgee, send them out to that one-man station out the back of nowhere that has very little crime. If you want to do that, you've got to take them from somewhere. And what I champion as Minister is allowing the police the flexibility to work out their own resource allocation model based on where crime is. So if there's more crime in Bankstown, they get more attention. If you have the occasional crime in the bush, it gets a commensurate response, but I leave that to the police. As a politician sitting behind a desk, there is no way I would call Andrew Scipione and Dave Owens in and say, I want more police there. This is a recipe for disaster, allowing politicians to determine where police go. Because I'll tell you what happened. Barry O'Farrell's elected, he will be beholden to the National Party, and they will demand more police in the bush, and that's fine if they want to fund them. But if they don't increase funding and take it from some other sector of government, they'll move them from the city, and that is a recipe.
What about his point? As a police officer gets ill, is not there when the public. What about the backfilling to make sure the service?
Again, I leave that to Dave Owens to do that. And this is not to say or to trivialise the fact that there are difficulties in the bush. The tyranny of distance is quite real in the bush, and sometimes if an officer goes off sick, it's just not a simple matter of plucking someone off a shift at Bankstown and telling him to drive to the back of Burke. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do for either governments or police, but I make a very simple point that I think politicians who tinker with the allocation of police resources, no matter where they are on a geographical basis, is is a recipe for disaster.
So it's not about politicians
And
drawing
for
up.
political interference in policing, and that is what we've tried very hard to stay away from.
It's not about politicians.
You won't be directing resources?
No. The whole idea is to put a resource allocation model of the association representing their members, the commission officers representing their members, and more importantly, the community understand how troops are in some areas and not in others.
You've cut the association into everything.
Because they are very active in talking to all sides of politics to ensure that their members have a voice. Doesn't mean we're not going to come to an agreement on every issue, but this one is something that they've been calling for. I'll give you an idea. Michael says, leave it to the cops to do. The North Coast Police have put forward a submission in relation to resource allocation on the North Coast. But when you look at it, it talks about large numbers being taken away from stations in the Sydney metropolitan area. Now, if we go to the Sydney metropolitan area where they're talking about one station losing over 30 police, do you think the public are going to sit back and go, well, gee, that's a good model, yeah, we're happy to lose 30 odd cops? No, there needs to be a statewide audit done at one time, comparing the same set of variables and factors. These guys haven't done it, we're going to.
Okay.
The solution to that is twofold. You find out why there's a problem on the North Coast, which is what we're doing, and then you'll see in the last allocation, which I announced in Parliament, on the floor of Parliament, they've got the biggest allocation of general duties and detectives of anywhere in the state. Find out what the problem is, but in the meantime, they need bodies. You fund the bodies.
And that's why Lake Macquarie and Central Coast detectives are looking at industrial action because of the warmth and knowledge knowing that the government's looking at the problem. They're actually proposing industrial action because they are sick and tired of the fact that they cannot work
They
out
can't,
why
they can't go on strike under the legislation. can they?
But they are looking at industrial action
Of
because
some
they're
form.
saying why the resources being shifted into
And
some
have a
areas and not
look
others.
at what we've done on those two staunch Labor seats of Coffs and Clarence, right, where we allocated massive resources to them recently.
Then you go up there and have a police officer break down and cry because he says to you that he has to leave his home, he's a lock-up keeper, he has to leave at 5 and 6 a.m. every weekend because he's got to get up before the town folk get up and come to the station and his home at 7 o'clock in the morning on his days off because he can never get a day off. Now, if you're telling me that's a good model, then we're going to get poles apart.
I'm telling you what we've done to address it.
Let's move on to industrial relations just quickly. The association seems to be concerned that you guys, Mr. Gallagher, will hand over the IR system to the feds. What's your position on that?
2006-2007, I gave a written undertaking to the Police Association, and we've also supported legislation in the New South Wales Parliament initiated by the Labor government keeping public servants, including police, in the New South Wales industrial relations system. I can tell you now we have not moved away from that position, and why in heaven's name, when they are your employees at a state level, would you want to sign over to another government entitlements and working conditions for another government outside of New South Wales to determine what impacts on your budget here in New South Wales? It is stupid to even consider it, and I hope to goodness the government doesn't even try to make that a scare campaign.
I don't need to. They scare themselves sufficiently during the work choices debate when in Parliament day after day after day when they're asked to repudiate work choices with all of the incorporations, all of those things we're talking about. Not only did the coalition in New South Wales not repudiated it, they supported it. It's Liberal Party policy right across Australia to do that. In Victoria, they handed over their IR powers. Western Australia have handed over their IR powers. And this is the golden thread that runs through a prospective O'Farrell government. He staked his political reputation on building the North West Rail Link and the M4 and the M5 extensions in his first term of government. Has $15 to $20 billion worth of expenditure that he's promised to deliver there. He can't do it without cuts. He can't do it without raising taxes. It's impossible. There is no ferry that's going to descend on Barry O'Farrell on the 27th of March and gift him $30 billion. He will have to find it from somewhere. Getting rid of the whole IR regime would be a nice little neat earn, cut it adrift, send it to Canberra and be totally in accordance with Liberal Party policy from coast to coast.
Can I make one observation? We've been talking for nearly an hour, and the government, through Mike, has not talked about their vision for the future at all. It's talking about statistics from the past and scared.
You can do that in
legislation supporting staying in New South Wales.
You can do that in the summing up. Right to silence. Just in the brief time you've got the right